and just wanted to welcome you to our second Think Talk of this semester. We are excited to be joined by Jason, and we'll get to know a little bit about him here in a minute, but he'll be talking about tobacco, juuling, vaping, cessation strategies, and the like in our community. And I just want to give a quick plug before we introduce Jason. So if you're interested in quitting, we do have trained tobacco treatment specialists in our student health service on campus. So you can schedule an appointment here. Or if you're not quite ready to see a specialist, we do have these awesome quick kits. I quickly made one, but they have goodies and distraction devices, like we have gum and rubber bands and other tips and tricks in the bag. So I'm just going to drop my email in the chat box so you can email me if you would like to receive a quick kit. And it is for students only, unfortunately. So yeah, I will let Haley, who is one of our Healthy Herd champions, take it away and introduce Jason.
Yeah, so I'm Haley. I am one of the Healthy Herd champions at NDSU, and I have the honor of introducing Jason. Jason McCoy is the Tobacco Prevention Coordinator at Clay County Public Health in Moorhead, Minnesota. He received his Master's of Public Health from NDSU back in 2015. Jason has been working for Clay County Public Health for more than 5 years, serving 4 counties by building coalitions, raising awareness, and advocating for policies that reduce tobacco's harm. As a grantee of Clearway, Minnesota, and the MDH State Health Improvement Partnership, he has led efforts in a variety of tobacco and electronic cigarette prevention policies, including city and county ordinances, tobacco-free grounds, multi-unit housing, as well as the successful adoption of 2 county-wide ordinances to increase the purchase age of tobacco to 21.
And I suppose that means that I'm up. Let me share my screen with you guys. Okay, can everybody see that? Okay, I'm seeing nodding heads, awesome. All right, there we go. All right, well, thank you so much for having me in to talk to you guys. I've realized today everybody's a little bit on eggshells, where none of us know exactly how the election is going to finish. So we're going to try to talk about something that's just as comfortable, right? Let's talk about vaping. So I'm just going to kind of dive in here. I'm going to try to make this short and sweet and leave us some time for questions at the end. Please feel free to ask any questions you happen to have, because if it's new and unique, you get a prize. So I've had a lot of questions over the last 5.5 years that I've been doing this, ranging from what is vaping to, how do we stop? How do we quit? And also, that's awesome. You guys have quit plans. By the way, I was just thinking real quick, Nicole, reach out to me afterwards. I have some resources. I can maybe provide some extra materials for your quit kits. So, all right. Yep, you already know who I am. So let's jump right in. Is tobacco use and exposure still a problem, right? We start with this rhetorical question because we wouldn't be here talking about it if it wasn't a problem, but I love the picture, so I have to use it. Cigarette smoking is down nationally. The national average is under 16%. In Minnesota, it's down to 14.4, and North Dakota is barely above that. When it comes to teen use of cigarettes, we're knocking the ball out of the park, guys. We're down to 5% cigarette smoking rates for in teens, and again, North Dakota is barely above the Minnesota side with that. So that's a great thing. We've been working on that. The average young person right now, yes, the average middle school, elementary school student about a cigarette, they know for a fact that this is not something they want. They understand that dip isn't something they should be using, but vaping, it's snuck in. It snuck right under the radar. About 15 years ago, it didn't reach our Midwest until roughly about 6-7 years ago, and it's still new. The average adult has no clue what a vape looks like, what it does, and the average response is, isn't that something for cessation resources? Well, let's talk about that. Vaping wasn't even considered a tobacco product until 2016. It came onto our market in the United States at a time when the FDA through some really unique and ingenious legal ramifications from the tobacco industry's lawyers and different lawsuits that they had filed, that the FDA could not deem or state that a new product was a nicotine product. And so vaping and hookah reached our shores, and they could not call it a tobacco product at that time. It took them a good 8 years to get that law passed. So somehow, and this is fascinating to us all, one day I'm sure we'll see a paper on it, somehow they were allowed to be sold as other product, you know, some kind of an other thing. So that meant that the vaping companies could say anything they wanted about their product, and they did, right? We're nothing but water vapor. Well, there's no water in vape. They said we're a cessation resource. We exist to get people to stop smoking. Well, there's a couple problems wrong with that, right? If you switch one nicotine source for another, did you really quit? Not really, but they will state they will. And on the top of that, something most people don't know is there's not a single vape company that has even tried to apply to be a cessation product in the United States. Haven't even tried. Very happy to tell you they are, though. And they've said all kinds of things. We're safer than smoking. I'm about to prove that that's wrong. And they've said things like we can cure COPD. No, they can't. But they could do it, right? Nobody could call them on the carpet until 2016 when this law was passed. Then we can now challenge their statements. They cannot make any more health claims without proof. And they're currently going through what is known as the pre-market review. Notice pre. This was supposed to happen before they hit the market, where they have to prove a couple of things. One, that the ingredients that they say are in their product are in their product. And two, are they safer, or at least as safe as the nicotine products that are already approved to be on the market. And granted, this is the lowest bar possible, right? Cigarettes, when used as they're supposed to be, kill 50% of the users. You don't have to get a much lower of a bar than that, right? So we're going to see what the FDA does. Right now, they are going through that review process. They have the opportunity, if they want, they could pull the entire vaping industry off the market. Will profits go over people? We're going to find out in real time. So I promised you we would jump right into this. Let's talk about health. So we're going to get to COVID-19 and tobacco on the next slide. But for right now, let's talk about what's been going on with vaping health. Let's start about 5 years ago. We started hearing about something called popcorn lung. Popcorn lung was this issue that was very much like COPD that was happening to some people that vaped. The name originally happened in popcorn manufacturers. Some of the employees that would work on the floor, they had this product called diacetyl that they would add to the bags that we put our microwave popcorn in. It was part of the bag lining, part of that buttery smell that you would get when you would open that nice bag of fresh popcorn. Unfortunately, diacetyl, when inhaled extensively into the lungs, could cause this disease that they didn't have a name for that, so they call it popcorn lung. We found diacetyl in some cinnamon and apple flavored vapes, and it was causing this injury in some, I'm going to use that word a lot, some of our vape individual users, okay? And so we knew that it wasn't all vapes, but we were still continuing to monitor this. Diacetyl got pulled out of production by the vape industry because they sure didn't want to be labeled the same as the tobacco industry. Then fast forward to about 3 years ago, we started hearing about this new issue called wet lung. Wet lung, in a nutshell, is chronic pneumonia, okay? And it made sense because as we started looking at this, the individuals getting it were teenagers. It was happening quite often during the school year, and it got mistaken very, very often with pneumonia or also influenza. Because you think about this time of the year, if you were to go into the doctor and you had a cough, you had fluid on your lungs, you were running a fever, and there was no COVID, they would assume you had pneumonia or influenza. Quite often, they wouldn't even test you. They would just give you antibiotics and send you home. Well, for a teenager who was vaping, and to the degree that they had wet lung, this would get worse, right? Because it wasn't going to get any better. That antibiotics would do nothing for them, and being at home, they were free to vape as much as they wanted to. So now go to last fall. Last fall, we got EVALI, which is the CDC's acronym for electronic vaping and lung-related injuries. I didn't make up that, I'm sorry. But that was the name they gave it. But if you recall the news, we had a whole bunch of people put into the hospital. And as you can see from the numbers here, almost 3,000 people died from it. Now, this was probably the biggest headline until COVID came along, and COVID kind of swallowed this up. But here's what EVALI is. We finally got enough research to prove the damage that vaping does. And these pictures that you can see here, that's what they are. They're literally lung x-rays, okay? We've proven now that vaping causes chemical burns in the lungs. And this makes sense because EVALI, the vaping industry tried to say that the only way that this is going to happen is if you have THC. The big marijuana came along, and don't kid yourself, there is a big marijuana these days, came along and said, oh, no, that's not our products. You know, the products we have are safe. So they started trying to say, well, they're these illegal cartridges called dank cartridges. That's got to be it. Well, you know what? The only thing in lung biopsies proved was that there was some vitamin E acetate in all of them. Okay. And the CDC isn't still willing to close the book, but it's very strongly correlated that vitamin E acetate was one of the main problems. Now, here's what that is, because you're like, okay, Jason, what the heck? You know, my vitamin C caused problems? No, vitamin E acetate is a liquid fat that is put into other liquids that does a really good job of binding to what you want to stay in the product. So you want to keep some extra fructose in your pop, you might use vitamin E acetate to bind that extra fructose into your pop, right? So in this case, it was used to bind some of the flavoring ingredients into the liquid so that when you would shake the bottle, sorry, my fingers went really weird there. As you shake the bottle, it would stay in the liquid. Now, let's make that make sense to us. You're frying some bacon in the morning in the pan, right? You spray some oil into the pan, that oil sizzles and pops. Now, imagine if you breathe that into your lungs. One might imagine some damage to happen to your lung tissue. This is literally what's happening to the lungs of those who choose to vape. As they breathe the stuff in, yes, it is cooled, but the chemicals are causing these chemical burns. And it's the exact same thing as if they had just inhaled hot grease. It's burning the lungs. So good news, if we can catch it, some of these people, they had to be intubated, right? They had to be put on ventilators. It had gotten so bad. In Wisconsin, we had the first ever double lung transplant in a teenager because of this. It got so bad. If we can stop it, we can drain the fluid from their lungs, and the cysts will go away. If they stop vaping and don't do it ever again, they will still have scars in their lungs. This is something they're going to carry for the rest of their life. So we will still be continuing to find out that more information about this for as long as their cohort lasts, right? It's a sad state that we have to be here and have to get our information this way. The reason why individuals were dying from this is because if they didn't stop, you think about a burn on your hand. You get that nice little water pocket around it, right? Well, that's what would happen in the lungs. They would fill with fluid to try to protect the lung tissue, and eventually you would literally drown. So the idea of, is smoking better or safer than vaping, or the reverse, is answered in that they are both deadly at this point in time. What we can add to that question or to that statement is that vaping, because it's a cooled mist, allows you to vape very, very quickly, okay? You could pick up a vape today if you've never used it, and you could vape an entire Juul pod, the equivalent of smoking a pack of cigarettes to 2 packs of cigarettes. The average young person at a party can go through up to 3 pods easily. So we're talking 6 to 9 packs of cigarettes in a day. And a person can do that and and accelerate to that rate in as little as a month. No one becomes a chain smoker of 9 packs of cigarettes in a month. That takes hardcore work, right, to get there. Not that we're clapping for them, but I mean, it's hard to get there. And so this is why we are now starting to be able to edge out and say vaping very likely will be the first product that will be more deadly than smoking. And that's a lot. So moving forward, tobacco and COVID-19. As COVID-19 came along, we have various research that's popped out. Obviously, COVID wasn't around as of January, so this is all fresh research as it's come out. And here's some things along with the links to the research. If you're interested, I can provide these as well. We found out 3 main things. 1, smoking and vaping doubles the rate of COVID progression in the body. This makes sense. There's a new piece of literature that's just coming out that shows that vaping lowers your immune system completely in the body. So it puts you at more risk to anything if you're vaping. So of course, you're damaging your lungs. You might expect respiratory illness to go faster. 2, we know that it increases the risk of worst case, read intubation, ventilators, and death by 200%. Okay, so again, this makes sense. And then the latest piece of information that's come out is that smoking and vaping increases the likelihood of even catching COVID by 7 times, so up to 700%. And again, it makes sense. If you have healthy lungs and you are exposed to the virus, there's a better than 50% chance that you will get past it. It will never infect you. You'll be fine, right? We know this from the numbers. But if you have weakened immune system, if your lungs are already damaged, the chance for an infection to take hold and spread is 700% extra. So we know that there's a direct correlation here. And all of this brought to you by the wonderful industry that always has targeted high school students and those they view as less than themselves, right? So this has been, by and large, a lot of rich white guys that have sold tobacco products to, first of all, women. I mean, that was the first way that they targeted women with the first flavors, menthol. And then they went after the African-American community. They then went after the Hispanics and Native American culture. And lately, it's been the LGBT community. Every single time, I don't have time to go into it here, but there's an entire presentation I have on how flavored tobacco has been used as a targeting tool. These are 2 of the quotes that came out of the tobacco lawsuit settlement 21 years ago. And these are 2 of the nice ones. I mean, these guys know what they're doing. They knew their product was addictive and they sell it anyway. And now they've just masked it in some colorful flavors. Vaping's a big problem. I have Minnesota numbers. I apologize. I live in Fargo, work in Moorhead, so my dad is always on the Moorhead side. But the nice thing is that the North Dakota numbers are always within a few percentage points of the same. So we got super concerned as a state when we got our 2019 numbers showing that our rates were doubling. We were up to 26.4%. But guys, I have high schools in the 4 counties I work in that have a 44% use rate, okay? So we're talking almost half of the 11th graders are vaping. We have 5th to 6th graders vaping. It goes lower than this. This is just as low as the Minnesota state numbers go. So it's been a growing issue. It's, of course, that translates up into our colleges as well, right? And this is pretty fascinating. When we look at that claim that vaping exists as a cessation product, only 3% of the vaping market is above the age of 25. Think about that for a minute. 3% of that market is above the age of 25. The majority is young people. And here, check this out. 75% of those 18 to 24 who vape never touched another tobacco product. So to us, we say that's an initiation product, right? That brings you around to vaping. That didn't save your life from smoking. That introduced an addiction and all this damage to your life. So this is why we we work on it so hard. How can they possibly still attract people, right? If you remember from health class, I'll reintroduce you to the idea. Smoking, okay, actual cigarettes kill 500,000 people in America a year. 500,000 people. Right now, we are understandably very concerned about the fact that COVID has killed 220,000 people, okay? More than twice that will die this year from smoking. Why aren't we doing more? That's a great question. We can't cover that right here. But they still manage to get new users. And that's the mind-boggling thing. It isn't like they suddenly leapt to this kind of a death rate. And yet they still. So I always say, in my opinion, if you take morality out of it, the best marketing companies in the world work for big tobacco, because they know that they have to take this high level of death. There's no one in the United States that doesn't know someone or a friend of someone, a parent of someone who hasn't had some kind of tobacco related illness. It's just, it doesn't exist. And yet we still have teenagers who pick up and decide to start. 5%, right? It's a very low number, but there's still 5% of our young people who make that choice, knowing full well what's going to happen. Why? Look at these numbers. $110 million spent on marketing in Minnesota, $23 million a day in the United States. Imagine what we could do in health promotion if we got $1 million an hour to spread our messages. Wow. So they make these kind of profits, and they need to keep doing this. They have to, it's just like, it's like a sawmill, right? You got to constantly put new wood in to make new products. And so they know that. Except in this case, the teenager is their person that they want to get addicted to use their products. Why? Because they know if they don't catch you by the age of 18, 90% of all users start before 18. 95% start before 25. If they don't catch you by the time you're out of college, they've lost you as a customer for life. And so they have to put all of their targeting in there. Now, most of this marketing exists on social media, so the average adult will never see it, right? They've understood how to geo-gate a Facebook ad, an Instagram ad. They're on TikTok. They're on all the social media. Their advertisements come in the form of coupons that will disappear in the next 3 hours if you don't use them, so that they get some excitement in you. And of course, it's never about the problems that might come. They've reinvented their wheel. It is not the Marlboro Man anymore, right? Now it's the same thing though. It's about inclusion. Do you want to be popular? Do you want to be included? Do you want to be part of the in crowd? And that's what they sell to us. So it's yeah, there's a lot that could be said about the tobacco industry's marketing. And that's the reason why we're out here having this conversation. So what is a vape? Well, a vape consists of 3 main parts. And they started off looking like a cigarette. That's why I keep this picture. Most people don't realize we've had 4 generations of vaping products. We started with the Cigalikes, and I keep this picture. You got to really look for this one anymore, but I keep this picture because it's really helpful. You have to have a cartridge. You got to hold what's known as the juice, right? The e-liquid. You have to have a battery because they're all electronic. The most important piece is that atomizer. The atomizer on one hand takes the juice and literally does that. It superheats it to the point of atomizing it. It creates a micron so small that it can penetrate deeper into your lungs than anything else, cigarette smoking included, and cause respiratory harm at a greater distress level than smoking does. Then on the other half, it cools that superheated aerosol into a cool mist so that you can breathe it in. Now, this takes away that coughing and choking that cigarette smoking has going along with it. So you can actually pick this up and use it easier, and it makes it easier on the mouth, easier on the lungs, as far as the aesthetic of it. Now, they found out very quickly that nobody wanted something that looked like a cigarette. If the kids already weren't going to pick up a cigarette, they're not going to pick up an electronic device that looks like a cigarette. So they went down here to the bottom right, and you can kind of see the progression. By the time you get to that kind of tan looking one in the middle, that's generation 2. They wanted to look different than a cigarette. Then generation 3 was the boxy one there in the middle called a mod, named so because you can modify how much smoke you pull into your lungs, how big of a cloud you want to have. A lot of different things could be done, but that's a big bulky device. And so they jumped to generation 4, and that's when Juul entered the market. Juul did everything right when it came to business strategy. They hired social media influencers. They got their advertising team out early. They picked the best flavors that were on the market at the time. And they created a device that was so easy to use. You don't have to refill your device anymore. You just pull a new pod, plug it in, away you go. They made a sleek, easy device that fit in the palm of your hand. For a young person, it was very easy to hide. Unlike a cigarette that you couldn't light in the classroom, for example, you could easily try to get away with vaping in the classroom if you blew the cloud down your shirt. They did a great job with what they did. And there's a reason why. They went from 0 to 75% of the market share in 2 years. That was just unheard of growth. Now, they've also, due to a lot of their predatory tactics, been sued by everyone and their grandma. And they've now went to the point where they were worth over $35 billion 2 years ago. They're now worth about 13, but that's still $13 billion that they're worth. So that's a lot of vape that they've sold. And now they're kind of, as Juul is being targeted, this bottom left hand, disposables are coming in, the puff bar and things like it. They look just like a Juul. They taste just like a Juul, except they have more flavors, and they cost about $8. And they come with as many puffs as about 2 packs of cigarettes. Then you throw them away. So when we think about health promotion, we could wander off into talking about our landfills and how all these lithium batteries containing poisonous products are now landing in our landfills as well. So that's going to be a whole nother problem, but that's another conversation. So that's the device. The device hasn't killed anybody. It's the juice, right? We got 15,500 flavors on the market at this point in time. Boggles my mind. Imagine walking into Hornbacher's, looking down the pop aisle, and it exists for 15,000. It'd be the entire grocery store would have to be full with a different type of pop on every single shelf, right? And yet that's what they've managed to do because, again, no regulation. And so they made all these different things. It's also why it's taken a while for us to catch up with our research, because you got to compare one thing to the other. Is, the one that tastes like vanilla cookies any better for you than the one that tastes like apple pie? Well, what about unicorn poop, a real flavor? What does that do to your lungs? We've had to test all these different things. So if you like it, they've got it. And that's why it's so important right now that pre-market review is going on, because we need to find out. Oftentimes, I think one of the best quotes, I'm gonna probably kill it, but one of the best quotes that I've heard is, if you think about the old adage of leading a horse to water, well, the tobacco industry wants to lead teenagers to smoking, right? And so flavors are their way to lead you to the addiction that nicotine will bring on your body. They don't care which of their products you use, but flavors get you there, and the addiction then keeps you there. Okay, there's no water in vape. What is it then? It's a mixture of liquid glycerin and propylene glycol as a base. Both of these products, if I was trying to sell you on vape, I would tell you they were approved by the FDA as a food for human consumption. I wouldn't tell you that's only for a food additive, something that you would eat, that your stomach would digest, that would take like 6 hours or more to get into your body. The FDA is very clear about saying, vaping this stuff, it goes into your lungs in the first second, into your brain the second, it's in your bloodstream, right? They have not approved this for human consumption as far as being aerosolized. What we do know now, in a recent piece of information that's come out, or of research that's come out, is that propylene glycol, when superheated like this, turns into formaldehyde, okay? The same stuff that we put into our dead bodies to preserve them. This is a carcinogen, and that's just the base of the liquid. We add to that liquid nicotine, okay? This stuff can absorb through your skin. So if you happen to be confiscating it or finding an empty pod that you want to be a good neighbor and pick it up and throw it away, try to wear a glove. If you get any of it on your hand, do wash it off because it will absorb through your skin. Now, just a drop isn't going to do anything to you. Don't worry, you're not going to get addicted that way. However, we have had principals who have accidentally had some dump on their hand when they were trying to confiscate a bottle, and they've landed in the ER with nicotine poisoning. It can happen that fast. So you make your vape in this kind of a mixture. On top of the nicotine, vegetable glycerin, and the propylene glycol, you add your unique blend of flavorings, and that can be artificial, organic. I mean, they're very happy to tell you if they have organic ingredients, like woohoo. But you know, the tobacco leaf is organic. So second and third-hand vape are a thing, just like secondhand smoking is a thing. If you're in the cloud, you're inhaling the chemicals. Third hand, for those who haven't heard of this concept, is the concept that it's not a magic fairy dust, right? This stuff will fall on everything around it. And so if you've walked through the cloud, it's fallen on your body, you're now carrying it. If you can smell it, you're inhaling these carcinogens. And some of them have a half-life of up to 100 years, guys. So this lasts a long time. This is the reason why our daycares, our hospitals, our clinics, why they won't allow nurses or medical workers to be on the floor if they smell like these products, because they realize, and think about it, you don't want your grandpa who's in ICU to have someone bringing carcinogens into his bedroom with him, right? And so, or have your picking up your baby, you know, because they have the weakened immune system on either end of that spectrum. And so that's why we have that. So yes, if you know someone that vapes and you're just trying to hang out, you know, you are still breathing this stuff in. Propylene glycol, boy, it can do this to your gums as well. Some new information we just got in 2019 from the Periodontal Advisory Committee. They did research and shown that vaping can actually be one of the worst things for your teeth, even worse than smoking. Now, we know this doesn't happen to everybody. This was everybody that vapes smile. First of all, no adult would have to wonder if their kid was vaping. They would know. And two, no teen would do it, right? Because nobody wants a smile that looks like this. What we do know is that particles in the vape actually cause inflammation of the gums, which cause them to recede. That happens to everyone that vapes. At that point in time, it depends on how much they take care of their teeth as to how far the damage goes, but it absolutely causes damage inside the mouth. On top of that, there's a few other issues. I mentioned the liquid nicotine has caused poisonings, especially in toddlers, because, you know, if you're 2 years old, you can get into a child safety cap better than your mom and dad can. And if it smells like Skittles, boy, howdy, do you want that in you right now, right? And so, unfortunately, we've had more than a 200% increase in toddler-aged poisonings since these products have been on the market. Labeling isn't always the same. There's some very set guidelines at this point in time, but quite frankly, the FDA isn't checking up on them. I have seen a label that says on the front 0% nicotine, and when you look at the ingredient label, it tells you it has nicotine in it. So there's some definite falsification of data that's going on there and their sales. And then the batteries are lithium batteries. They're prone to overcharging. They can explode. I don't have any videos for you, but go to YouTube, put in vaping explosions. You'll see some horrific things. You'll see some kind of funny things. But they do explode, and when they do, quite often they have lethal results. We've now had a handful of deaths in the United States from these happening. Nicotine. This is the addictive property for all of these. Everything else I'm talking about kind of leads to this. All of these products lead you to the addiction, and nicotine is one of the 3 most addictive substances on earth. And it tags into the pleasure center of your brain. If you know a smoker or a vapor who's having a hard time quitting, I guess the best way I could try to explain this is imagine if every single thing in your life was 50% less exciting. Okay, if you can picture that, hold on to that for a minute, and then introduce a cigarette or introduce your vape. And that's what brings it back to as much fun as it is now. Your favorite meal, your favorite activity, watching a movie, hanging out with your friends, whatever it is, it gets less than once you've become addicted, because it binds around that pleasure receptor. It's hard to quit, really, really hard to quit. That's why we have trained people to help cessation. So if you're on this and you're interested in cessation, absolutely reach out and get help, because no one should go through this alone. There's always been people who puff up their chest and they're like, hey, I quit cold turkey. It's hard to do. The average person quits. The quit attempts are up to 70 on average. Okay, it's hard. That's okay. That we're here to help. Juul created nicotine salts. They added sodium to the salt, or sodium to the nicotine. The sodium opens the blood vessels faster so that the nicotine can get in the system faster, created addiction faster. Just another one of the reasons we're suing them. So many people are after them. That's also the reason they were able to pack so much nicotine into their product. As I mentioned, the average Juul pod is 1 to 2 packs of cigarettes. As far as regulation, in case you haven't heard, we do actually have a national law that says you have to be 21 to purchase and use the products. We do need local laws to help back that up. Minnesota, just this legislative cycle, passed a tobacco 21 law, so it is the law in Minnesota. North Dakota hasn't quite passed that yet. However, it is still falls back on that national law to be able to use and sell. Most stores are following along with this, so we're watching the ones who aren't. So this is a lot of information in a really short amount of time. People always have questions. What can I do? How can I help? Well, you started it right here. Learning about this yourself puts you at the forefront of our community. I would say probably about 50% of our community don't know what you just learned. Be willing to share it with others. If you're part of another organization that you think would be interested in hearing this, I am always available. I'm a free resource. I say always use me. Don't feel bad about it. That's what I'm paid to do. And if you want to do research on your own, make sure you go to credible sites like the surgeongeneral.gov, cdc.gov, truthinitiative.org. There's some really good, you can usually tell the difference. If they're willing to tell you about what I just told you, go through, yeah, it's going to be attractive, but this is what's going to happen to you. And they're not all leaning into, look at how cool I am, you know. If it doesn't have a rap star, you know, trying to promote it, then you probably are on a good website. I always remember, tobacco industry has a kids menu. We're all at the college level on up, but they're after our kids. They're after the kids, and they always have been. All right, I am going to stop now and take any questions that you might have. Thank you so much for showing up.
Jason, I have a question. I wonder if you would share your PowerPoint, or is that not something you do?
I can. I always have to give this extra little piece of information with it, though. I, unlike most presenters, don't put notes. All of this is up here in my head as I go. So you'll get some pretty pictures, but I don't know how much it'll be helpful. But absolutely, I can.
Thank you.
I'll also just jump in and say that we are sharing the recording of the presentation today, so that will be sent out on the listservs as well. So you'll have access to reference that recording soon.
Awesome, thank you. Any other questions? This is always the fun part where we stare at each other and go, who's going to go first? And I say something silly like, you're all experts now, right?
I don't have any questions, but I just want to say thanks. That was a lot of stuff I didn't know. And also now I'm scared because that's a lot of scary information to know. So that was useful. I'll probably look at some more stuff now after you shared that.
Absolutely. That's the whole point, is just to educate as many people as I can. I'm part of a team of health promotion, and I'll joke with them that they always get the good stuff, They get to come in and say, hey, let's get kids to eat more vegetables. Yay! Hey, let's get kids to move, and we've got money to pay for a playground. Yay! Then Jason comes up and says, hey, let me scare the living crap out of you. And everybody at the end of my conversation, I've never had somebody stand up and go, woohoo. Everybody at the end of my conversations are like, oh, crap. Like I kicked their puppy or something.
Sounds about right.
But it has to be said, so.
And I would agree with Nicole. I learned a lot. And you're right, I don't know all this stuff. I'm not the target audience, so I am definitely appreciate the information. Thank you.
Absolutely. One of the scariest things I learned in all of this is how social media can be geo-gated is the term. If you haven't heard it, you can literally take a social media ad. Let's say we as a group wanted to sell our new, Bison Puffs bar, and we could make an ad that would only target, let's say 16 to 24-year-olds. We could say we only want it to be if you come onto NDSU campus. So we could literally make it that small of a gate. And so then anybody in that age range that passed through our campus would see our ads, and it would cost us about 50 to 75 bucks to run that for about a month. Yeah, it's frightening what they can do. And that's exactly how they do it. Ask a teenager how many times, that you think will actually tell you, how many times have you seen a vape ad or someone on social media using a vape, talking about how it's cool, doing a trick or something like that. The average is 5 times a day. I ask their parents, I'll do this in parent-teacher conferences on purpose, and then the parents' eyes get about this big, and I'm like, how many have you seen in the last year? Big fat goose egg, right? They're smart. They know exactly what they're doing.
I took a ton of notes, so I'll probably be in contact with you. And
absolutely.
Thank you everyone for joining, and for Jason for giving us all that information. Obviously we are stunned by the content, but it's good stuff that we need to know. And then I did just want to mention, if we saw some people on, that we do have another Think Talk on November 18th, and it's going to be at noon, and it will be on how to talk with your opinionated relatives over the holiday season. So just wanted to slip that in, and then in case anybody is listening to this recording after, so that will be November 18th at 12. So that should be fun. So yeah, but I don't have anything else. Jason, do you have any final anecdotes?
If you're just to once again plug, if you are on the Minnesota side of things, we do have a free resource called the Minnesota Quit Partner. It used to be called Quit Play, and it's called Quit Partner now. And it provides free cessation resources, free nicotine replacement therapy, and we have a specialized teen helpline now called My Life, My Quit. I know that was already on the North Dakota side. We finally got added to the grouping. It's a beautiful, if you have a teenager that's having issues, refer them there. That it's teens talking to teens. So it's a great resource, and it's had a really good success rate.
Awesome. All right, well, I think right at 1. Awesome. Kind of worked out perfectly. So thanks again to everybody for joining, and have a good rest of your week.